Daddy Strong. What's Daddy Strong's name? Dad Strong.
Harwin or Lionel?
Lionel. He's just sitting with Lionel and it's like, she likes my miniatures. And he's just like, bro.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Bite Marks. Joining us on this spooky Halloween is our lovely co-host Callum.
Hi, I'm Callum, pronouns he, him.
And we have a special guest. Say hello to Hillary from Hills Alive.
Hi guys, I'm Hillary from Hills Alive. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Emilio, your host for today. We're gonna do blood sports. It's blacks versus greens.
What are your pronouns?
My pronouns are he, him. I'm just very excited because we get to talk about something that I've been wanting to talk about on this channel for quite a while. Game of Thrones, specifically House of the Dragon.
Yeah, it's the best. It's the best show on TV right now, in my opinion. It's very good. I was super worried about it, but they're doing good. The only downside to the show is that they didn't change the intro song.
Yeah, that is a pretty funny. That is kind of funny, but.
That was definitely an odd choice given Ramin Djawadi's incredible skill at scoring.
Yeah, the rest of the music in the show is amazing, and then they just use the same song. That sucks.
So my personal conspiracy theory is that when the actual Dance of the Dragons picks up, they're gonna drop an absolute banger of a new intro, and that's just gonna be the new intro.
Speaking of the Dance of the Dragons, sorry, this is a very spoiler-heavy episode. So if you haven't seen House of the Dragon and you don't know what that thing that we just said is, maybe give this one a miss for now, or just pause it and then go and watch the show and then come back.
Yeah, we're joined by Hillary because she is basically a subject expert in Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fire. She has a really awesome channel called Hills Alive. My personal recommendation, if you want to watch a video of hers that I think is really nice, is her theory on Fagon or Young Gruff. That video for me, I think was really, really good because I was totally in the camp that Fagon is actually a Blackfire, but after watching that video, I gotta say my mind is a little bit changed, and that usually doesn't happen, so I think she does a really, really good job of making Game of Thrones theories. Hillary, why don't you just tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
So my channel is Hills Alive. I tend to focus on Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, House of the Dragon. My bigger focus tends to be more character analysis driven rather than theories, but I do dot some theories in there. And I guess I tend to, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a contrarian, but I like to look at the sort of commonly accepted fandom perspectives and sort of question, is this a valid perspective? Is there anything that I can do to disprove this? And if there is actually substance to the counterpoint view, it tends to draw my interest.
Yeah, I don't think
we're notoriously contrarian on this podcast.
We are not. I don't think that counts as contrarianism. I think that's just the fun of analysis.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I do want to say, real quick, favorite Game of Thrones character, go.
Sansa.
Oh. What? Explain yourself. Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised. She's a great character, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's anyone's top one.
Really?
I've never heard someone say Sansa before.
I think people who watch the show, who are more show people, don't tend to like Sansa. I think more book readers, have a lot more, because Sansa in the books is quite...
Oh, Sansa in the books is amazing.
Yeah.
She's
no, I guess I just find, both versions of her sort of relatable, or I love that George R.R. Martin put a character in a fantasy story who just I love her characterization in that obviously most people who read fantasy stories or watch them or whatever imagine themselves in this fantasy world. And while everyone wants to be a Dany or an Arya or a Bran or a Jon, I would totally be Sansa. Yeah, someone would kill my dog in the first book, and then I would just be stuck with every asshole in the entire world, and I wouldn't be able to do anything cool, and I just have to keep my head down and hope that I survive to the end.
I'd be Hot Pie. I've already got the build for it. I've been preparing for this role for years.
it will come as no surprise, but my favorite character is Sirio Farrell.
Fucking course it is. The one sword, the official sword boy.
Yeah, well, in my real life, to speak about your point, Hillary, like, yeah, most people probably would just be like peasants or whatever, stuck to whatever, because most of us would not be lords, but in my day-to-day life, or at least in my weekly life, I teach people how to fight with swords. I teach, martial arts and stuff like that.
Oh.
So I would actually be qualified as a sword, guy. Not like a knight or anything, because I'm not noble, but I could teach people how to fight with swords, and I've been pretty successful. So I feel like I could do like a Sirio Farrell type deal.
You could be
know?
a Bron, because I don't think you're quite flamboyant enough to be like a Bravosi Bravo.
Have you seen me fight with my cloak?
I have. I have, but you don't fight like open shirt on like the balcony of a bridge at night over a shit-filled river while cats watch.
Yeah, that's because I got work in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I have some sword experience. Maybe I could be like a nameless mercenary type. So a little bit more agency than the average person, but not like an actual lord. Or not like a Jamie, definitely.
I'd probably be a wildling because of the way I eat chicken.
Quickly. So who in House of the Dragon so far? Who are your favorite characters?
For me, definitely Alicent and Aemond.
Yeah, same. Aemon is definitely my favorite character so far. And you, Callum?
Laris Strong.
Ooh, that's a spicy take.
I do. He's a fucking bastard, but like, I love an evil character. And Caraxes.
Oh yeah, our special wing boy.
I love my Danger Noodle so much. My son is strong and healthy forever, please.
I do really love how they like. One big criticism I had of the original Game of Thrones series is that the dragons look very similar, and they really went out of their way to make all the dragons look distinctive. I love that, like, Caraxes just has like a really long neck, and no one ever like thinks anything about it. He just has like a really long neck.
And Cyrax looks like thin, like dot-like almost.
Yeah.
And Vhagar is just like a mountain. You get the sense that like Vhagar has seen some stuff. Like she's been fighting. And the showrunners did not have to do her dirty like they did in the interviews, but they were like, "This dragon has IBS, by the way." And it's like, guys, please do not pull a J.K. Rowling on us, please. I do not need to know this. But yeah, also another good character I think is Viserys. I really love Viserys. Paddy Considine fucking killed it in this show.
Yeah, if he doesn't get an Emmy, I will be very upset.
Because... that last episode where like Viserys is coming into the throne room, and he's hobbling, and he's like it looks like a Dark Souls cutscene. He's got like the half mask, and he's like, everyone like tries to help him, and he says, "No, I can do it." And then Daemon helps him. And I'm just like, and he has one good dinner with his family finally.
Yeah,
I definitely have been super impressed with Paddy Considine. I was like mad at the beginning of the show because obviously I feel like Viserys is to blame for everything. So the fact that he was so appealing, and I was like, oh, I would love to be friends with this guy. He just seems so sweet and like innocent.
I love the fact that he has like minis. The fact that he has minis makes him a king in my mind.
He has a hobby. How can you not love this man? Like, I love that he's lovable. I love that he's like the least capable, least cunning, least qualified person to be in this role, but he's like, the most friendly.
The first like wargamer king, like actual representation. He's got just like a mini version of like Valeria, and sure, the courtship between him and Alicent is weird. Obviously it is weird because he's older. It's less weird than him and Lena, but like it's still weird. But the way that she like it's not like she's wearing the dress. It's like, oh, she takes an interest in his models. So I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So they really do.
Just imagine him sitting with like fucking Daddy Strong. What's Daddy Strong's name? Dad's
Which one,
strong.
Harwin or Lionel?
Lionel. He's just sitting with Lionel and it's like, she likes my miniatures. And he's just like, bro, you gotta marry this
She
girl.
doesn't. She's faking it.
My king, I swear. No, Lionel, she likes the statues. She gave me a dragon.
Right. So, with all of that preamble out the way, you can see now, viewers at home, why we do this podcast. The topic for today is really, like, fantasy has always had a reputation for being, like, really, really problematic in terms of depictions of women, in terms of, like, handling sort of feminist issues. Oftentimes, women are basically sidelined. In Lord of the Rings, pretty much, it's basically just a dude's rock episode for the most part. And Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon are different in the sense that women do feature prominently. Now, granted, generally speaking, women are not like actively in like a fighting role, although there are some notable exceptions, but they actually feature prominently in terms of having characters, in terms of having character arcs, doing things. House of the Dragon in particular, I think, is a show that really gets it in terms of discussing what it means to be a woman in a man's world. And yeah, we gathered our the Avengers of the Game of Thrones podcast world, so we can talk about
the three
this.
Avengers. How there's only 3 of them at any given time.
Yeah, so Callum, you said in the preamble that you were team black, and Hillary, you said you were team green.
Yes.
So Hillary, why don't you start us off here? Do you think do you think House of the Dragon Hot D does a good job of like basically giving us female characters who are actual characters?
I would say sort of. I feel like the characterization of Rhaenyra has been a little bit thin thus far. Like I don't feel like for instance with Alicent, I can imagine her in different situations and understand how she would act and why she would act that way based on her own experiences and her characterization in the show. I don't quite feel that way with Rhaenyra at this point.
Well, if I can give my I don't know why I'm going to say my 2 cents, but we started on this treacherous path, so I may as well finish it. Rhaenyra, I think, is not feminist.
Yeah.
Because
Agreed.
she is entirely self-interested, but I think that she thinks she's feminist. Because she hides the selfish nature of what she's doing under the guise of rebellion.
Right. I would say, I mean, feminism as a concept obviously doesn't really exist within the universe anyway. And I don't think, I mean, I think one of the things that sort of makes House of the Dragon not necessarily funny, but like it's a good sort of send up of fantasy in the sense that like a lot of these people have no political knowledge whatsoever, especially Rhaenyra. Like looking at Rhaenyra and having her ask her father to just like fix the problem every time something goes awry. It's so painfully obvious that she has been given zero preparation for the role that she's supposed to fulfill as the queen. So when it comes to social issues or political issues or any sort of ideology, I think she literally just doesn't have it.
Yeah. I think, well, look, if we can just take a step back for a second, I think it is somewhat unfair to try and latch these characters into modern feminism when they're not in a modern society. You could really honestly say that none of them are feminist, because it's not like Alicent and Rhaenyra are fighting for power so that they can finally give women rights. They're doing it because they want power, and if they don't, they'll die.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, there's something it's like we're talking about like modern values and stuff like that. I distinctly remember like Sam trying to, in the end of spoilers for Game of Thrones, but like Sam was like, maybe we should do like a democracy, and everyone just laughed at him.
Yes.
So there are such things as like material conditions where it's like the society that exists, the material conditions of that society kind of like dictate what you can do. And to a large extent, I totally agree with both of you. It's like, yeah, women don't really have rights. The idea that a woman is a person is very, very far away from where Game of Thrones actually is. But that being said, there is still an interesting conversation to be had, because like Rhaenyra is rebelling against the system. She's doing what she wants, and she causes a lot of friction with Alicent, who is continuously doing what she's told, by men. Both of these women have men, father figures, their fathers, who are kind of like failing them in different ways. With Otto, like basically just forcing his daughter to do a bunch of stuff, and Viserys just like ignoring her, ignoring the fact that she's completely politically like incapable of like making, being the queen that she's supposed to be,
Yeah.
It's also
Yeah, I would. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say that the notion of Rhaenyra as rebellious is an interesting one because she isn't following the rules that she is supposed to be, but she is saying that she is. A huge aspect of her characterization and why things go so far left with her character is because she does whatever she wants and then says that she was doing something else. Like, for instance, with her kids, saying that all of her kids are Laenor's sons when they're obviously not. So she's not bucking the system in the way that a lot of people tend to perceive her as, because obviously we're seeing, her internal experience and her experience that she's hiding from the world. But she's not making a show of trying to be different from what the expectations are. She's simply saying that she's fulfilling the expectations when she actually isn't.
Yeah, and to bring Alicent into this as well, like, it's interesting that we say that Alicent is sort of operating inside of the male-centric system while Rhaenyra is operating outside of it, quote-unquote. But honestly, Alicent has managed to, just by following the rules, gotten to a point of power in which she can change the rules. She doesn't. She chooses not to due to, I would say, like, what's the word when you want someone to go through what you went through because you think that's fair?
I don't think there's a word for it, but like, yeah, she's very proceduralist in the sense that like, if I had to suffer, you have to suffer.
Yeah, so it's less that she's being controlled by the system anymore, but obviously there are still people above her and everything, but it's more that like she is now almost indoctrinated into the system and has the power to change it from the inside, and somewhat does do that by exercising her power, by making space just by in the subtle way of controlling things from the background. But it doesn't seem as like rebellious as Rhaenyra does. Rhaenyra is also doing the same thing. She's just playing the system.
Do you guys think that Alicent's faith is an important part of why she holds true to the way, part of like her character? Because a lot is made about the fact that she's a faithful believer of the Seven, whereas Rhaenyra is a believer in herself, principally, and maybe some old Valyrian traditions, but not really a religious character. What do you think?
As far as my perception of Alicent's piousness, I don't necessarily feel like it's put on, but I feel like I think a lot of people overlook the fact that she is a daughter of House Hightower. House Hightower has existed in Old Town since literally before recorded history. They've been in power there for ages. So with Alicent knowing that she's probably going to have to go up against Rhaenyra in the future, creating a stronger connection with things like the Faith or the Maesters is a huge political card that she has to play that she knows Rhaenyra doesn't. So I think there's probably an element of truth to her faith, but I think she's putting a big show on it because she wants their support when she goes for the throne.
That's interesting because it is revealed fairly early on in the show that like Alicent's praying, and I suppose you could interpret that to be that she's just doing that because that's what is expected of her. But I think it is that she is religious. I don't disagree with you, though. I do think she is sort of playing it up to get more political power. But I do also think that she is quite religious, and that's why, for instance, Rhaenyra's potential relationship with Daemon early on was so infuriating to her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's not only the biggest sin, but it's also the biggest sin.
It is kind of interesting that the Targaryens have ruled Westeros by the time of House of the Dragon for quite a while, relatively speaking, and by the time of Game of Thrones, they will have been in power for even longer. But they never were really able to supplant the baseline faith of the Westerosi, right?
Well, what did the Targaryens believe in?
Well, they have their own, basically their own. Hillary, you feel free to, you're the expert here, but feel free to correct me. But the Targaryens,
I mean, they believe in sort of themselves, that they are literally gods on Earth, or that they are above normal humans.
The Targaryens have like a religious belief that they're like a different type of human being. That they're descendant literally from the dragons that they ride, and so they don't have like a religious doctrine, and that comes to bite them. Well, the fact that religion is like this major factor, because like religion was hugely important in the medieval world, right, in our own past. And the show Game of Thrones kind of talked about it. I have to wonder if like maybe Alicent will use religion as like part of the war propaganda, because it's like, the Westerosi you see the Targaryen belief system as like a foreign one, and like Alicent is a faithful member of like the High Towers, and they're like the bastions of the faith.
Or like,
so, like
not even the belief system, but just that the fact that Rhaenyra and Daemon are openly insulting the faith's tenets.
It's very unusual, because you would expect the Targaryen influence of their like religious practices, because every time you have, like, for example, the Normans, they conquered England, and they're like a foreign ruling class. They won like they won a few battles and basically supplanted the English ruling class, and they really changed the character of English Christianity by a lot. So it's kind of weird to me that the Targaryens don't have that same like religious shift on the landscape. They've always just kind of had to deal with the fact that the Westerosi believe in something very different from them. And I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that they've been ruling for a long time, because, I mean, their ultimate reign winds up being, I think, a little under 300 years total, which, in terms of the scale of Westerosi history, is like almost nothing. If you look at families like the Hightowers or the Starks or the Strongs or the Gardners, there's a lot of families that have existed and been a part of some sort of ruling class in Westeros for thousands of years. So I think that, combined with the fact that the Targaryens really went out of their way to not assimilate to Westerosi culture at all, that sort of limited their influence, and is a huge reason why they ultimately wound up being overthrown, is that even beside their failings as rulers, they didn't marry into Westerosi houses a lot. They didn't assimilate to Westerosi customs. It was very easy for the people of Westeros to just sort of pluck them back out of the country, because they had kept themselves separate for so long.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because like in terms of like the situation that we've got, like the Targaryen political position at the end of the House of the Dragon is basically terminal, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the Dance of Dragons, like most of the major Targaryens are dead. They've lost all their dragons pretty much. The dynasty is basically hanging on by a thread. And the fact that it's even able to persist after that civil war is quite telling, I think. Maybe just because the dance was so destructive just to Westeros in general. But
and then like, 2 generations later, they do it all again.
Right.
Martin is very unsubtle about his themes about like people in power being like corrupt and not caring about like the people below them, right? Because we talk about like how this is like obviously one of the major issues with why this can't really be a feminist work is because the women of the kingdom are ultimately going to be like when a city is sacked, they're going to be the ones who are assaulted and abused and stuff like that. It's generally speaking not the highborn women who have to suffer. They have a different kind of indignity to suffer, right? They have different expectations and conformities. You were talking, about like how you like Sansa. Sansa's a great example of that. She's a highborn woman and she's got to deal with a lot of problems, but she and the lowborn woman have very different life experiences.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, it's kind of it's kind of like that in a way. I also wanted to get your guys' opinion because like this is something that has really divided the fans, which is the proposal that Rhaenyra made to Alicent regarding marrying, I think it's Helena to Jace.
Yeah,
Yeah. So what do you guys think
I have
about that?
opinions.
All right, let's
Okay,
hear it.
I can sport this one. To start with, the notion that this was somehow a good solution to the problem that they were confronting makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever, because it doesn't solve the problem. The ultimate fundamental problem is that Viserys has trueborn sons, and that Jace, Luke, and Joffrey are bastard children, and everyone is aware of that. The offer to marry Helena and Jace reads to me almost like not necessarily a hostage situation, but it's like forcing Alicent and her side of the family to support Rhaenyra when things inevitably go sideways, because people are probably going to challenge her claim, or challenge her son's claim. So if her son is married to her daughter, like, then she would essentially have to, throw her daughter to the wind and let her daughter's life be destroyed if she wants to help her sons or support her sons' claims in any way.
Callum, go ahead.
Thank you. I also think that, like you said earlier, this isn't going to solve everyone's problems. This is going to solve all of Rhaenyra's problems. This is purely Rhaenyra trying to kill two birds with one baby, and it is not. It's not a good solution. But Viserys sees it as one because he just wants everyone to be friends, and he sees like, if you swallow your pride on this and you just accept the solution, we'll be friends again, and that solves all of the problems, he says, while the stepstones are on fire for the third time in like 10 years.
Right.
Yeah, the fundamental issue that I have with this proposal, because I've seen a lot of discourse around it, and I don't understand why people are okay. So like Martin, he makes a point about like you shouldn't like think about like these struggles. You shouldn't get personally involved in them because ultimately they're political struggles by highborn people, and that's not how he wants you to think about politics, right? But obviously people will still get invested, right? This is a very deeply personal civil war. It's fun to do that kind of stuff. But I think people who are supporting Rhaenyra's plan don't actually understand what the enormity is that she's proposing, because basically Alicent knows that the kids, Jace, the strong boys, are not legitimate. Everyone knows this, that they're not legitimate. If they do become legitimized by that marriage, right, where Alicent's like, I accept your marriage because I, have to, I can't marry a illegitimate kid or whatever, that just puts everyone in danger. Because not only are their claims invalid or up to at least being challenged, but it doesn't, fundamentally resolve the problem, because other people will have a right to challenge those people, and it doesn't really fix the issue, because the ultimate issue is no one is going to get around the fact that Rhaenyra's kids are not legitimate. That's like the thing that hangs over everyone else, is that Rhaenyra, she maybe she should have picked a concubine, a boy toy who had like darker skin. Maybe that would have been able to mask the deception. But she fell in love with Harwin Strong, and the Strong kids are very obviously his.
I mean, love is a strong word, Emilio. They're clearly affectionate towards each other, but I mean, he died in a fire, and she honestly doesn't seem that upset about it.
Yeah. I guess that's
a little weird.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that is true. Do you think that? Yeah. Do you think she just like moved on super quickly, or is she just like, oh, this situation is volatile, it's time to hook up with my uncle?
I think. Sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead first.
I think Rhaenyra is, and always has been, attracted to physical power over projected power. So she doesn't respect Viserys. Don't know why I said it weirdly. Because his power is all like implied.
It's institutional.
Yeah, whereas
He's king, but
she respects Daemon because Daemon can swing a sword good, and he has a dragon. So I think she's very much more attracted to like physical power, and when Harwin isn't like near her, it not only like frees up her situation, it like she won't have him nearby to Well, it doesn't really, because the implication is that he left because people found out about their affair. But, like, also, he's not there anymore, so eventually people might forget. But also, it's kind of like object permanence, I think, where she sort of finds the next powerful thing and sort of tries to get in league with it. Not necessarily get intimate with it, but, like, get it on her side.
What do you think,
would say
Hillary?
my perception, Rhaenyra is a character. I feel like her emotions are hard to get kind of a read on, and I would tend to agree. I don't necessarily know if she's attracted to power or if she just sort of seems to like do whatever she wants to do and like without forethought whatsoever. So I agree that the notion of sort of her lack of object permanence, that like once Harwin was gone, she just wasn't like that bothered about it for some reason. But yeah, I don't think that I obviously think based on her reaction, she probably was not in love with him. But I don't think she's necessarily, I don't get the vibe she's in love with Daemon either. Like she doesn't seem that into him.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Maybe the trauma of like, because she saw that her mom and dad loved each other. Like, if you can say anything about Viserys and Emma, they did love each other. Their relationship wasn't the best, but they loved each other. And maybe when she saw her mother die, essentially at the hands of her father's, like, selfish desires, she kind of got a trauma response to the idea of being in love with someone.
Oh, yeah. It's
that
like,
would not surprise me.
like being in love with someone gives them power over you, that type of thing.
Or like
Yeah.
you're... Even to a different degree, being in love with someone gives you power over them, and people are fragile.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting. One of the dichotomies that has been brought up in the show House of the Dragon is that like men and women are both like subjugated in a way by the feudal society, the feudal patriarchal society of Westeros. Men in the sense that like boys have to be trained from a young age to kill people. You've got to like, if you're a man, you have to be willing to like go into the battlefield and do violence and stuff like that. And if you're not good at that, then you're not really a man, right?
Yeah.
You know, a lot was made of that duel between the Blackwood and the Bracken.
And also the fact that Larys has to sit with all the women.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
can't participate in the hunt.
Yeah, Larys is also a great example because like he's not a typical man. He's a schemer.
He's not an
right?
alpha.
Yeah, and the show and Game of Thrones has shown us that like men who don't fit into the mold of what it means to be a man have to resort to other things. Like, you know, we've got Varys, who's an eunuch, Tyrion, who's a dwarf. You know, you've got those men on the fringes who are like trying to do power in a non-typical way because they're not like Jaime or Jon who can just like put on some armor and go fight.
Yeah, and all the men who do conform are fucking miserable. I mean, Ned is like one of the most honorable characters in all of Game of Thrones, and he is tortured and miserable all the goddamn time.
Well, you know, you also have people like Oberyn. I also quite like Oberyn as a character, but he's very happy and he's very and that's probably because of like Dorne. The cultural values of Dorne are very different, which is probably a subject for another podcast, which I would be down to do. But the point that I was getting at is like on the other side of that spectrum is that you've got women, right? And like the thing for women is like, all right, your big danger is the birthing chamber, right? You know, you've got to produce the child. You know, you've got to have the baby and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, you're living in a society where like people don't believe in the germ theory of disease. Childbirth is dangerous.
Yeah.
Childbirth is dangerous nowadays, you know, with all of our medical technology and stuff like that.
And we even stopped using chainsaws on it. That was the original purpose of the chainsaw, by the way, to aid in childbirth.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that's how they cut through the pelvic bone.
Oh my god.
Yep.
Why would you
And-
cut through the pelvic bone to have
Because
a
we're
C-section? Oh my
fucking
God.
stupid. And then we were just like, man, this keeps killing a lot of women. I wonder if it would work on a tree. And then it did. I wish I was lying. Or joking or whatever. This is not a bit.
The deep lore of mankind is deeply cursed.
Let's keep
Whoever's
talking about dragons.
Whoever's like writing the Wikipedia, like the galactic Wikipedia page for mankind is just like constantly dealing with the editors like, no, you made that up.
No,
Humans
this
didn't do that.
truly cannot be true. They had
yeah,
3 world wars.
Oh no, don't give us foreshadowing.
Right.
I have to. It's my
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, but like, so to sort of circle back, the point is that like, yeah, childbirth is like the woman's battlefield, you know, like, and from a very young age, Rhaenyra was like, oh, her mom was gonna die in childbirth, and there was like no debate about it. There was nothing that could be done. It was she was gonna die anyway, or they would try to save the baby, and that must be horrific, right, to have to deal with. And because she's a woman, and she has to deal with that reality as well. It's like she's going to eventually have to give birth, and she doesn't want to be in that situation. I feel like that like really drives her. Whereas Alicent doesn't really have that same like situation. I think the show even points out like Alicent has a very easy childbirth, right? The
baby's just falling out of her.
Yeah, the baby's just falling. It's like, oh yeah,
The most horrible thing I've said on this video yet.
And yeah, I think that's really interesting because the show actually is, in a way, like that is one of the core like feminist ideas. Like the women's liberation really does involve them being liberated from that expectation of childbirth, but it's like placed on Rhaenyra, and she responds to it in a very different way than Alicent does, because she has these affairs and she does all of these wacky things that endangers the kingdom. But Alicent just like is with Viserys, even though it's clear that they're not like into it, not necessarily. Like it's a duty for them to do, but they're not like into it.
It's a marriage of convenience, but it's also a marriage where they like respect the marriage.
Yeah, it's like you could get the sense that these two people, they respect each other. Viserys is not like hitting Alicent, right?
Yeah,
he's not doing that.
He's
but
not
it's like
dick.
It's just that he's not really into it. He still loves Emma. She doesn't love him, really.
Oh, that scene where he walks past her at Lena's funeral and he calls her Emma.
Yeah,
Right.
Broke my heart.
Yeah, well, Lena is also a good example, right? She, at the best that she can get is to go out in Dragonfire, but she still dies, right? Because childbirth is a crazy thing. How much do you feel that really factors in to the way that Rhaenyra's character is, Hillary? That she's afraid of like this power that
Dying like her mother, basically.
dying like her mother. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there is a really interesting sort of subtext to her having bastards with Harwin Strong, because that obviously puts her in a situation where what was done to her mother literally cannot happen to her, right? Because Harwin Strong doesn't have the right to say, I want you to, try to save the baby. I want you to do whatever without Rhaenyra's consent. It puts her in complete control of that situation anyway.
Yeah, and Laenor is gay, and he can't come out and say, he can't really challenge her, because she could always just be like, he's actually gay, therefore he couldn't, the marriage is illegitimate or something.
Yeah, and that's also why she was so mad at him for naming her son.
Right.
Because it takes the power away from her.
Yes. And even she wouldn't even necessarily have to tell the truth. I mean, if you look at what just happened to Vaemon Valerian, he was literally just saying what the truth was, right? And he wound up getting very brutally killed because of that. Because
he can keep his tongue.
Daemon
Right.
Daemon Targaryen did a classic Morbius.
Yeah. It's interesting because they slightly altered that aspect from the book to the show. In the books, Rhaenyra actually orders that Vaemon be killed and then feeds him to Syrax.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah,
CGI.
Right. So she's in a position of power over the men that she's with, at least up until when she marries Daemon. Even though I guess she is, I mean, given that she is supposed to be the heir and he's supposed to be the consort, that still puts her in a position of power over him, relatively speaking. So yeah, I would say that there is some theoretical weight to the idea that she is doing a lot of what she does literally because she just doesn't want to be her mother and doesn't want to die like her mother did.
Yeah. Whereas Alicent doesn't have to do that. Presumably she doesn't have that same relationship with her mother, but also just like...
Well, because her mom's pretty dead, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a different type of dynamic that you've got going on, Also, this has reminded me, it's like something that is also quite divisive, I think, in terms of like the discourse, is like the discourse around Kristen Cole. how do you guys feel about his character, and like how do you feel about his reaction to Rhaenyra and spurning his a plan to go to Bravos and become like a random people? You know, how do you feel about that?
He reacts very poorly to Rhaenyra, basically suggesting the same thing he did, but the other way around. Not in the sense that they leave and go off together, but that he drops all of his like principles and ideals and stuff the same way that he asked her to do that like 5 seconds ago, and then he like screams and cries at her. But I do, which is fucking pathetic, but I do kind of also get the whole, this is literally all he has to his name. And he screwed it up, and now he's looking for some way out. And he is a knight, which is essentially someone who makes their business out of doing violence. Violence is the only thing he knows how to do good, and that's not going to help him get out of this one.
Yeah, I would say that my perception of Kristen, I think that I think that his experience with Rhaenyra is obviously traumatic in some way. Obviously she's in a position of power over him, and as you said, he sort of gives up everything that matters to him, forsakes that for the sake of their relationship that she doesn't seem to be particularly invested in. And given his interaction with Alicent when he tells her the truth, he's literally expecting to be tortured and killed. So to have that sort of weight like hanging over you, and then have Joffrey Lonmouth confront you over it, and not to say that Kristen's reaction was remotely rational, but it's more understandable from the perspective of like, we're talking about something that could literally mean the end of his life, and from a psychological standpoint is a massive disconnect that he has between the person that he wants to be and the ideals that he has versus the person that he has been because of his relationship with Rhaenyra.
That's the episode where Viserys. It's after or before that episode where Viserys is like talking about, was he a good king, right?
Mm-hmm.
So around that time, the show brings in this idea of like legacy. If Kristen Cole is tortured and killed for despoiling his what's it called, Kingsguard oaths, then that is his legacy. That's what gets written in the White Book, and that's it for all time. And this is the highest honor anyone from his house has ever like received. The amount of pressure on this man to do good is insane.
Yeah, I think both of you are touching on some really interesting points. I think Kristen Cole for me is a very interesting character because in loads of other fantasy stories, like someone like Kristen Cole would actually kind of maybe even be like a protagonist type figure, right?
Yeah.
Because he's the underdog knight who rose. He did the thing that knights are supposed to do. He beat Daemon in a duel, in a joust.
Yeah, he beat the big dragon man.
Yeah, he beat Daemon Targaryen, who is not by any means a slouch in combat, and he beat him in a fight, which is like the ultimate symbolism of like masculinity, right? You know, we're talking about like how, you know, we're talking about sort of like patriarchal norms. Cole is in a large extent a victim of the patriarchal norm because he's only ever been taught that he needs to show his worth by violence. He does the thing that he's supposed to do. He wins the fight. And then Rhaenyra picks him to be Kingsguard, which is not a decision that anyone was expecting, right? She picked him ostensibly because, you know, the reason he gave is because he actually has fighting experience. He's actually been in combat, so presumably he's a good fighter. But really, she picks him because, you know, you get the undercurrent that, like, she doesn't want to just have another knight who's going to walk around who's like a political appointment, you know, who's someone that is there for like the political value. She wants someone that she feels like she can talk to. And they do have like some relatable aspects in the sense that they're sort of almost outsiders in a way. But like, as you said, Hillary, there's a huge power imbalance between the two of them, right?
Yeah, but there's also a huge, like, in the moment, Rhaenyra is way younger than Kristen.
Yeah.
And in that moment, in their bedroom, when they're, you know, it's just the two of them, The idea that she is more powerful than him politically, I feel doesn't factor into moment-to-moment decision-making there. So I don't know if her political power over him, because it's not like she threatened him. She just, like, fucked around for a bit, and then he found out. But...
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I think the entire notion of sort of consenting in the world of Westeros is interesting in this lens, because you sort of have to ask yourself how much consent is possible when the class stratification is so high, and when basically, like, you're on a rung of a ladder, right? And the person who is above you can just decide that you die, right? Because they want that to happen to you. It's not necessarily that simple, but the level of power that people exert over each other, I think raises an interesting question about, like, can these people ever have a real relationship that isn't coercive in some way?
Yeah, like, obviously, I think there is some element of coercion between the fact that Kristen is definitely much older. I think in the books, Kristen is meant to be a bit younger. Rhaenyra and Kristen are meant to be closer in age. I can't necessarily confirm that.
In the books, Kristen says no, and Rhaenyra gets sex lessons from her uncle.
Ooh.
On an island somewhere. Yeah, but that's Mushroom. He's just like, yeah, that's happened. And then and then he says that Kristen Cole spurned her.
Mushroom is a nasty boy,
right.
But yeah, but to continue with your point, Hillary. Like, yeah, I totally do think there are actually some, like, Kristen must be thinking in his mind, okay, oh shoot, I'm in this position. What do I do? If I say no, what is she gonna do? Is she gonna tell her dad that I, like, tried to touch her? You know, is she gonna be upset with me?
Can I punch all of them? Will punching all of them work?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I don't want to excuse his actions, because I think that the fact that he basically just he's so unable to process his emotions that he kills a man, you know, is, again, it's toxic masculinity. But, like,
yeah,
I kind of have to wonder, like, yeah, maybe those things were going in his mind when he's like, oh shoot, now I have to do this. But if I don't do this, maybe I'll, you know, face punishment. But if I do this, I'll give up my oath. You know, I think it was an unwinnable position from the start, I think. And so the fact that Kristen became what he was, you know, like, how do you guys feel about his, like, character arc, you know, later on, where he's, like, basically Alicent's sort of, like, loyal knight in a way?
Her
you know, he
hound.
trains the kids. Her hound, yeah. He trains the kids to fight. And he did a good job, because Aemond apparently is a badass with a sword.
Yeah, I mean, Kristen Cole's good at fighting. He's a good at fighting. But,
he is.
yeah, that's, like, the whole deal. So it's not like he's unqualified to be there. He's just also kind of a chode.
Yeah, he handled the whole... He dwelled on it. I think his crime is that he dwelt on it, because it's clear that Rhaenyra didn't really think about him that much. But he didn't mean much to her.
But that's the thing. Like, to answer your question, that's why I think it's so perfect that he is with Alicent, because she's also dwelling on all this. I think I just punched my microphone. Anyway,
you were the Kristen Cole this entire
No! Don't give it away. Alicent and Kristen are both stewing in, like, envy and regret and trapped in a system that they... I don't even know if they believe it's right, but they definitely don't think they can go outside of it. And then they see Rhaenyra, who goes outside of it willy-nilly all the fucking time whenever she wants, and they hate her for it, and they just stew in that, and that's what causes, like, Alicent to almost stab the princess, and Kristen to be like this. But you can also see the hesitation. Like, Kristen, I don't think Kristen wants to be like this, because when Alicent tells him to go and cut out one of Rhaenyra's son's eyes, he's just like, no. He just doesn't, he can't do it.
I think that I understand Alicent and Kristen's relationship is one of the most interesting aspects of the show to me, because they have very much been, they're people who have done literally everything right. Obviously, aside from Kristen having a relationship with Rhaenyra, he has done the best that he possibly could within the society. He's followed all the rules, and he's done what he's supposed to do. Same thing with Alicent. She married someone that she's not in love with. She gave him 4 children.
Of varying quality.
Right. She's been a loyal, dutiful wife.
You have to give him
and-
sponge baths. Ugh.
I know, right?
Ugh. The leprosy
and-
body.
I mean, I wouldn't mind. He could tell me about his cool figurines.
Yeah, but she had to deal with him when he was like basically decomposing.
Yeah, but it's like, you know, when you get sunburnt and you have dry skin and you peel it off, but it's like that on someone else. Just, ooh, what's under here?
And then you just keep going until there's a hole in your face.
Yeah, Viserys has crackling. Ooh, it's a
Right.
human bubble wrap.
Gross.
Yeah, enjoy that image, everyone.
So yeah, from that perspective, I understand their relationship in that like they have done what they're supposed to and have been basically discarded by the people who are more powerful than they are. So I understand why they would connect with each other, because they sort of want to believe like that all of the things that they have had to go through is for a reason aside from some other person who is more powerful than them just wanting what they want from them and then tossing them to the side later.
Yeah, it's a trauma response. It's
Right.
It's interesting that like the characters, obviously, again, it's going back to material conditions. It's like no one thinks that the system is to blame. Really, I think that's actually for me something that's very interesting. Like Kristen Cole and Alicent both go through terrible. Rhaenyra, everyone basically goes through these terrible moments, right? Alicent, is forced into a marriage she doesn't really want. To have kids, etc. Kristen, all of his stuff. Rhaenyra, being subjected to all the political machinations of other people. It's like everyone is forced into the system, but like no one thinks that there's even anything outside of it.
Well,
Right.
But that might not be. That might be intentional.
Yeah,
It's like they're blinding them. It's like how no one says out loud, Viserys is this way because of power, because the chair ruined him, because the stress and the everything of being in charge when he knows he isn't qualified, where he knows he doesn't fit here, like that destroyed him. No one says that out loud, because if they do, it'll call into question why they want it.
Yeah. I also think it's like, correct me, Hillary, if I'm mistaken, but I don't think there's like a way for a monarch in Westerosi society to like abdicate the throne, right?
I don't
'Cause
think anyone has ever abdicated it now.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, everyone wants this thing. As Callum said, everyone wants this thing, right? To not want this thing is to like be a fundamental like paradigm shift of society, and so like no one is capable of really thinking that there is an alternative to the way that they're being treated. That instead of projecting all of their hatred onto Rhaenyra as this Joker-esque villainess who's just doing whatever she wants. The reality is everyone's hurting because they're in a system that compels them to hurt other people. As you said, Hillary, it's like, yeah, we have these power dynamics, and it's like, is it even possible to consent? Like, is it even possible for people to consent in these types of power games that we've got? Like, I don't know. I think it's a legitimately interesting question, because to challenge these assumptions is to challenge Westerosi society and the entire way that the whole place has been set up. And like, there's a reason why everyone laughed at Sam when he was like, oh, maybe we should do a democracy. And that's because people just don't believe that there are alternatives. No one really thinks that there are ways outside of this feudal, violent, patriarchal order. Even people who are ostensibly, trying to maybe buck the system a little bit, like Rhaenyra, still thinks that she should be queen. It's not like she's like, oh, I'll take power and then institute it. No, she wants to be queen, right? She thinks she has the right to. She doesn't fundamentally think the system is wrong. It's just she thinks the system is slightly in need of adjustment. Not that like not like monarchy is bad, but male primogeniture is bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do want to just... Oh, sorry.
Oh, no. Well, she doesn't think that male primogeniture is bad, because she makes arguments for her sons that they should, for instance, get driftmark because of male primogeniture. She just thinks that she should be the exception to that standard.
Yeah, it's a callback to your earlier point, where it's like she does things that are against the rules, and then she acts like that. That was like
she's
the rule
fundamentally selfish, but she cares enough about appearance that she tries to hide it under like nobility.
Right.
But here's the thing, and that brings me to a point I wanted to make, where we talk about like why Alicent and Kristen are so different. Because, and this is going to sound a bit weird because Alicent is a noble lady, they started this whole journey lower on the rungs than, say, Daemon and Rhaenyra. Because even though Alicent's she's nobility, she's not royalty. Daemon and Rhaenyra are royalty. They've been royalty their entire lives. They've always lived in a world where the system bows to them. And so maybe that is why, like, Kristen and Alicent can't see their way out of the system and have to work within it, because they've never known anything else. That's been their entire life. Whereas Rhaenyra and Daemon keep, like, bucking the system off in their own weird, selfish, self-congratulatory way, because that's just how it works for them. Because the system bends to who they are, not what they do.
Yes. So I think an interesting aspect, obviously, of House of the Dragon is that when we're talking about people who can't see a point of view or a possibility outside of the system, we're talking about a story that focuses on the people who literally created the system in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. So it makes sense that they would sort of be a part of that. And one of the most interesting aspects, especially like to your note about Daemon and Rhaenyra always being royalty, beyond that, they are the king's favorite, which influences almost everything. Like that, being subjected, ultimately, every single person's fate in Westeros comes down to the king's whims, right? So being his favorite is fantastic. Like, obviously, you can look at someone like Aemond. He is a prince. He is a trueborn son of Viserys, and he has a pretty horrible injustice happen to him when he's mutilated and then essentially blamed for his own disability. And
that gets swept under the rug immediately when the like legitimacy of Rhaenyra's sons gets brought up.
Right. Exactly. And he is put in a position. One of my favorite aspects of the way that they have handled Aemond in the show is that you can understand his character literally in like 5 minutes. That entire scene of him when he loses his eye and they have that whole argument completely illustrates who he is, who he becomes, and you can see him become it in that instant because he does the calculus of what is happening. He sees, that no one is defending him besides his mother, and that his mother was telling the truth. And if he tells the truth about her, then she could possibly suffer for it. So he literally has something unimaginably traumatic happen to him, and he immediately has to take it on the chin in order to protect his own family from his father, which is insane. But again, it shows how much everything goes down to Viserys's whims and who he likes more than anyone else.
Yeah, and just to like quickly touch on Aemond as well. I love how you also get to see that he's not above doing something really like dirty, even against the people he doesn't like, because he immediately makes it seem like Aegon was the bad guy. And it's just like this is a vengeful child. But
I really like Aemon Targaryen. I think he's my favorite Targaryen psychopath because I understand his character perfectly. Like you said, everything you need to know about Aemon you can see in like a 5-minute clip.
Yeah.
But I also really like the fact that he's super driven, and like to me, he like the most interesting villains are villains that have redeemable qualities. And to me, Aemon has like out of all of the different out of all of Viserys' kids with Alicent, I think Aemon is probably the one that embodies like some of the best and worst aspects of like the Targaryen lineage, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking about like how Kristen Cole could be a protagonist earlier. Aemon could be a protagonist. Like he literally doesn't have a dragon up until the end of his childhood, basically, and then he gets one and he loses an eye for it.
Yeah, he gets the biggest dragon, and obviously the losing the eye symbol is that's the like popular mythology. Odin trades an eye for knowledge. And Aemon basically from what I understand, and we're getting close to wrapping this up, but like from what I understand, Aemond is literally like the reason why the Greens have as much of a shot as they do in the Dance of the Dragons, because he's got Vhagar, and he's really good at fighting, and the other side can't really. So yeah, to begin to wrap this podcast up, I had a lot of fun. If you guys at home would like us to do this again, I'd be more than.
Oh, wait. Before we end, I have a fun sentence I want to say.
Yes.
They banished Daemon so many times they should install a fucking revolving door on the Red Keep.
Yeah,
Boom.
He that meme with like Barney would Moe from The Simpsons trying to throw Barney out of the tavern, and Damon's just like, no.
Yep.
I'm just gonna get a haircut and waltz back in.
And he's basically Kratos at this point, like escaping Hades.
But yeah, I did want to actually ask you guys. So like, Hillary, you're Team Green, and Caleb, you're tenuously Team Black.
No.
So. Okay, you're Team Nobody.
I like Team Green more. I just also there are people in there that I don't like, and there's some people in Team Black I do like. I want to watch this. I don't want to participate.
Right.
Yeah. So Hillary, for you, what is the appeal of Team Green?
Mostly because I understand Allison as a character. I feel like her motivations, even in the books, obviously Fire and Blood is extremely light on character development. We're literally talking about a book that is written from the perspective of an in-universe character who is getting at the best secondhand information about things that happened. And that's being filtered through his own lens of perception.
His biases, yeah.
But yes, for me, I feel like not necessarily that she was forced to make the choices that she did, but her choices make complete sense within the context of the broader world. And I feel like it's extremely weird that so many people sort of act like, if Allison had just done one thing different, or if she just made this choice, or if she just, surrendered everything to Rhaenyra and Daemon, everything would have been fine. And she's completely responsible for the war, which I think is insane. Again, I understand from her perspective that these are her children. They are always going to be a rival to Rhaenyra. So she either has the option of trusting the life of her entire family in Rhaenyra's hands when she is extremely, all over the place. She just decides whatever she does in the moment and doesn't really care.
I think in the books, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the books, Laenor is actually murdered by Rhaenyra, or she wants him to be murdered. And in the TV show,
it's implied that he's murdered.
Yeah, it's implied that he's murdered, but in the TV show, they fake his death. Yeah. But I totally agree. Rhaenyra is not like the most merciful person in the world.
No, she literally does that because she wants people to think that she murdered Laenor.
Yeah. So for you, it's a matter of like she has more relatable motives, and I think that's perfectly fine, right? I make no bones about it that I also quite like Team Green. I think Team Green is more interesting characters. I really like Helena. I think she's just the most precious.
Yeah,
she's so precious.
I think that's a universally accepted thing that she is like everyone loves her. Nothing bad should ever happen to her, and it's horrible that so many things are going to happen to her.
Yep. Yep, she is perfect and brilliant, and I hope they smuggle her off to Bravos.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, and switch her out for a fake. That would be great.
Yeah.
Fake.
I'm also on Team Green now, because Team Green, I've just realized, has 3 of like my favorite characters, including as the 4th one now, Alicent. I was convinced.
Right.
But
yeah, well, this is the power of Hills Alive's videos. She can come at you with the outside angle and convince you of something. I
do love Otto. I do love Laris, and you know what? What's his name? The eye patch man.
Aemond?
Oh, Aemond.
Aemond, you're a fucking weirdo creep incel, but I love you too.
Yeah, well, I really personally empathize with Allison's struggles because, I've had some frustrations of my own. It's like I felt like I was doing everything that I was supposed to, but it didn't necessarily work out, in my favor. And that's, I think, a lesson that people have to learn about life. But I think she's the more relatable character personally, and I also think that the system that Rhaenyra wants to propose is completely untenable. If she does win and normalizes basically the standard, then I think it's like completely inevitable that the Targaryen dynasty would collapse. But obviously we know what's going to happen. But if Alicent is able to stabilize the situation, then I do think that the dynasty would continue. But I also really like the color green. So
yeah, I really hope we find out how the one thing I want to come out of this show, because I know it's going to end well. It's been going well. I think it's going to end well. I really hope we find out how the Baelish family gets a hold of Viserys' dagger.
Oh yeah, that's weird. That's
Yeah.
like a weird. Never just like.
Maybe they trade it. Maybe it's we will give you this Valyrian artifact if you support our cause.
Yeah, it could be.
Interesting.
It's definitely one of those things that also kind of makes some of the elements of Game of Thrones feel a little weird. They've had that dagger for how long, and they never once
just put it in a fire for a while.
They never had it where it's I'm just slicing this ham, and just put the knife down while I take the ham out of
you don't understand. It's the medieval times. They don't cook ham, Emilio. We just get salmonella. You take it like a man. But also, I do kind of hate the prophecies in the show. I'm not super into the Song of Ice and Fire as a prophecy. I don't think it's interesting or cool. I can see why they did it. I don't like it, but I think it's also not lingered on it long enough for it to ruin the show.
Yeah, I think it's mostly just a political drama. I feel like even if the prophecy wasn't known to anyone, I still think the motivations for why the dance happens are very grounded in personal issues. Because it was inevitable. The minute one of these situations was going to show up, it was completely inevitable, right? That the Targaryen dynasty would self-destruct in this kind of way.
Very much like this video is now self-destructing. Thank you very much for being here, everybody.
Yeah.
My name is Callum, pronouns he, him. Does everyone want to introduce themselves the last time before we go?
Yeah, I'm your host, Emilio, pronouns he, him.
And I'm Hillary. My channel is Hills Alive. I'm she, her.
Yeah. All the links to Hillary's channel will be in the description. Please go check it out. Go watch the video about Fagon. I'm like a Fagon truther now.
Yeah, and keep your eyes on our channel as well, because we've got another big project hopefully coming out soonish. And please go and check out our various links. You can join our Discord. You can go and find everything on our channel. And if you want to subscribe, I wouldn't blame you. This was a pretty good episode.
Yeah. If you would like us to do more stuff, I'm totally down.
Tell us what you want. Tell me what you want.
You've been a great guest.
Yeah, I'm down. I'm always down to talk A Song of Ice and Fire, the World of Ice and Fire.
I'll suggest this after the video, but I have a fun idea. Anyway, thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.